Humans have either used or referenced birds in just about every aspect of life possible. How many different ways do you think humans have used birds? Because it's more than that. Birds appear in just about every aspect of culture that one might consider universal. The more tangible aspects of society, such as art, music, dancing, cooking, and clothing, as well as the immaterial aspects, such as mythology, philosophy, literature, and science. Starting with economics. Birds have an important role in the economy due to the substantial amounts of food they provide, as well as material for bedding, insulation, and clothing. Think of every gym bro you've ever seen. What do they always recommend? Eggs. What else do they recommend? Chicken. What else do they recommend? Hitting the like button for the YouTube algorithm. If you want to look like Sam Sulek, you gotta hit the subscribe button. Before the Neolithic Revolution, which was about 10,000 years ago, and prior to the development of agriculture, birds were among some of the main animals hunted and eaten for survival. People ate waterfowl, which is exactly what they sound like. Birds that are mostly confined to water, such as ducks, like Donald Duck, for example. Or Tanya Vanderflock from the Mighty Ducks, although she was mostly confined to the ice. And migratory birds, such as geese or the storks that deliver children. The amount of energy it takes to catch a bird is more than plants, but less than larger mammals. For example, every hour spent trying to catch a water bird returns about 2,000 calories, whereas a plant, like wild rye for example, returns only about 1,000 per hour, versus an antelope, which returns about 30,000 per hour. We've domesticated and bred poultry for at least 4,000 years. Chicken being by far the most important in this regard, having been domesticated in China as far back as 5,000 BC. These days, the breeding of chickens at the industrial level is fairly controversial and largely considered unethical. While it's responsible for a huge amount of food production, it's at the cost of immense suffering to millions of animals. It's basically the utility monster problem, which asks if causing an intentional amount of smaller suffering is worth it for the greater benefit. But even that question is problematic because people disagree about the ratio of suffering to benefit when it comes to mass breeding chickens. Nonetheless, between the meat and the eggs, chickens account for about 20% of the protein eaten by the world's human population. The next way birds are used is in the hunting itself. Historical records suggest interdependence between humans and vultures for millions of years. Interdependence meaning both creatures depending on each other for a common goal. In this case, vultures leading humans to carcasses, which leads them to more animals, which creates more carcasses. Rinse and repeat. This is also the case for cormorant fishing, where cormorants are trained to help humans catch fish. And greater honey guides, which are birds in Africa that help lead humans to beehives. Feathers are used for beds and pillows, like the ones you slept on at your grandma's house as a child. Quill pins, like the ones in any movie featuring a person writing in the 1800s, regardless of their social class or wealth. And fletchling arrows, like the ones that literally any depiction of Robin Hood shoots through another arrow. Not to mention guano, the word we made up because we didn't want to say bird poop. Guano was once an important fertilizer, and is still sometimes used for farming. Next, we have fashion. Pretty much everyone has seen the traditional Native American war bonnet, and they're not even the only Americans with feathered headgear. The Bororo and Mato Grosso peoples of Brazil both use brightly colored headdresses, a custom that has existed since before the birth of civilization. Even in Western culture, feathered boas have been worn by women in the 1920s and Elton John. Ostrich plumes were a luxury in Europe for centuries, so much so that it actually damaged wild ostrich populations, which is why ostrich farms began being established. Some people have even argued feathered clothing being a metaphor for female sexuality. For example, in the 1935 musical Top Hat, in which the actress Ginger Rogers danced to the number Cheek to Cheek covered in white plumes. Not only are birds known for mating dances, which act as a parallel to this, but in case you've never noticed, loose clothing tends to emphasize and exaggerate movement while dancing. Raptors, such as small eagles and falcons, had been used for centuries in falconry, both for hunting and sport. And on the topic of sport, cockfighting is not just an adult film category, but an ancient practice with records in India, China, Greece, and Rome. Cockfighting also falls under the umbrella of not just controversial, but straight up unethical and banned in most countries on the grounds of animal cruelty. A much more acceptable sport is one you may have never heard of: pigeon racing, where you release specially trained pigeons and see who can fly home the fastest. Picture leaving a concert venue. It's basically the same thing. The sport was invented in Belgium and is now popular worldwide. with distances ranging from 100 to 1,000 kilometers, otherwise known as 60 to 600 miles. And the one you almost definitely know, but probably didn't consider, bird watching. Some people are obsessed with bird watching, to the point where they know various species so well, they can identify roughly where you live based on bird sounds. Are you still trying to think of other uses we've had for birds? Because the next one is obvious. Pets. Everybody's favorite. Unless you had a loud bird growing up that never stopped screaming. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Cage birds, such as canaries, cockatoos, lovebirds, quails, finches, parrots, and budgerigars? That's what those are called? Hang on. Dictionary.com says it's pronounced
budgerigar.
Didgeridoo. All of these birds are popular for various reasons. Their songs, their behavior, their colorful plumage, their ability to mimic speech. The cage bird trait is actually so prevalent that it's also threatened certain species with extinction. At least 13 species are close to extinction in Indonesia, including their national bird, the Javan hawk eagle. Pet birds are kept in the millions. It's so popular that it even had an impact on evolutionary biology. Charles Darwin took an interest in pigeon fancying, which is not just looking at pigeons and saying how much you like them. Pigeon fancying means breeding pigeons, which can be done at an accelerated rate because of their short lifespans. He bred the proud pigeon, the fancy pigeon, the rooster pigeon, the chicken pigeon, the geometry pigeon, the pigeon, the cardinal pigeon, and pigeon with a long neck. Which brings us to symbolism and heraldry. I couldn't remember precisely what heraldry meant, so as a reminder, it's basically just the banner or coat of arms you see where birds look like this. The interesting thing is that the symbolism of bird species varies across different cultures. In Africa, owls carry a more negative connotation, often being associated with bad luck, witchcraft, or death. While in Europe or North America, they're often considered wise. Maybe they're considered wise in Japan too, since that owl is always helping you in Ocarina of Time. In Britain, over 3,000 pubs had birds in their names. Crow's nest, dog and duck, eagle and child. Those might sound made up, but they're real. We can make some up. The ugly duckling, falcon and fox, oiled feathers. Climate change is real. Mythology and religion. Birds have appeared in a variety of forms in both mythology and religion. Like in Egypt, remember? Here's an example of Chozo Snake Man. His real name is Thoth, the iris-headed scribe of the gods. Honestly, that's way cooler than my joke was funny. And we can't forget about Pokemon, right? The legendary birds, the other legendary birds, the remixed legendary birds, the legendary bird from the one that no one played, except that one friend in their 30s who still brings it up when they get a chance. It's me. I'm that friend. The bird from Shadow of the Colossus, that sand bird from Mario Sunshine, Larry Bird. There are several categories like this left in the article. And, as has become my habit lately, I'm leaving it up to you to learn more if you're so inclined. As usual, this article has tons of interesting information left. There's still music, dance, the dramatic arts, and conservation left. And these articles always have interesting tidbits of information that you'll almost certainly have not encountered before. Stay educated, drink lots of water, and make good choices. See you next week. As well as material for bedding, insulation, and clothing. And migratory birds, such as geese or the storks that deliver children. I think I said geese, such as geese. Some people are obsessed with bird washing. Bird washing. The iris-headed... In Norse mythology, Hugin and Munnin were... In Norse mythology, Hugin and Munnin... Why did I write this? In Norse mythology, Hugin and Munnin were ravens that whispered news into the ears of... I'm leaving it out. I'm not putting it in.